decades. And in his revealing new book, It Was All a Lie, How the Republican Party Became Donald Trump, he admits the GOP has used race as an issue to divide Americans in order to win elections. And Stuart Stevens joins us now. Thank you so much for talking with us. The book is jarring. I have to say, you write about how the Republican Party, over the last half century, its hypocrisy, what you call self-delusion, led it naturally to embrace Donald Trump and to embrace what had been its racism. Explain what you meant.
Well, I think there's been two strains in the party. Call it an Eisenhower strain going back to the 50s and a McCarthy strain. We think now of William Buckley as this intellectual soul of the Republican Party at a certain point, but which he was, but we forget that he began as a racist. So there's always been this element. Since 1964, the Republican Party has failed to attract large numbers of African Americans. We used to acknowledge this as a failure and talk about how to try to change it. Now, we don't even hear any talk anymore of a big tent, and we seem to have settled into a very comfortable white grievance identity.
And you acknowledge you yourself were part of this. You said in your first race, you played the race card, so to speak. There's a lot of blame to go around here, isn't there?
Yeah, I think it's really important, at least it was for me when I wrote this book, not to blame others, but to try to accept responsibility for it myself. I mean, personal responsibility was one of the key elements that drew me to the Republican Party, and we've completely abandoned that, it seems. Yeah, in my first race, there was an African-American independent and a white Republican and a white Democrat. I made ads that were sort of like voter ID ads, but they had the impact of informing African-Americans that there was an African-American in the race. If you go back and you read the Pat Buchanan and Kevin Phillips memo that was written for Nixon, which really outlined the Southern strategy, the acknowledgement that Republicans can't get African Americans, therefore the need is either to suppress them or to divert them from the Democratic Party, has been at the core of Republican electoral strategy.
And you write about how that and how what you describe as the hypocrisy around family values, and you do name names. You talk about Newt Gingrich, Jerry Falwell, some of the evangelical leaders, and how all this culminated in the easy acceptance of Donald Trump.
Yeah, I think that Donald Trump exposed these fault lines in the party and made it impossible for a lot of us to deny. The party clearly doesn't believe in what it said it believed in. I mean, I think that, you go back a few years ago, we would have said that there's a core set of beliefs: personal responsibility, character counts, strong on Russia, physical sanity, free trade, pro-legal immigration. All of these were bedrock principles. And now it's not that the party has drifted away from these. The party is actively against each of these principles.
And again, whether it's family values or again, race, your point is that it comes down to some pretty ugly truths about the party that you say is an entity that can't be fixed.
Yeah, I really have given up hoping that there's going to be some line that Donald Trump could cross. I mean, since I wrote this book, that has only been reaffirmed. Be it race, the same weekend in my home state of Mississippi finally took down the state flag, which was basically the Confederate battle flag. Donald Trump was defending the Confederate flag. He's out tweeting white power. He's tweeting about protecting the white suburbs. And for the most part, the Republican Party is just silent or goes along with it. I think that that's incredibly damning. And Trumpism is deeply embedded in the party. And I don't think there's any way that's going to be changed in at least probably for a generation.
And so what happens now? I mean, you and other Republicans who are dedicated to making sure Donald Trump is not reelected, you don't have a home in the party anymore. Where do you go?
I think those of us who are working in these various projects to defeat Trump, who are Republicans, I think each of us is going to have to come to grips with that and see what the world looks like on November 4th. For myself, Judy, I'm going to work with Democrats. I think that the future of America, the policy is going to be decided by decisions inside the Democratic Party. So take healthcare, for instance. In 20 years, is America going to be the only country that doesn't have national health insurance? No, we're not going to be that. So what that's going to be, it's not going to be decided in the Republican Party. It'll be decided in the Democratic Party, whether or not it's the AOC, Bernie Sanders wing, or more of a Biden wing. And I think that the Republican Party has made itself largely irrelevant in those discussions by just saying no. I'd like to be part of what's going to happen.
What's going to happen, though, Stu Stevens, to the Republicans who have continued to support President Trump? I mean, name Republican senators, Lindsey Graham, Mitch McConnell. You could go down the list.
Look, my feeling is that really Trump is George Wallace. And George Wallace actually did some good things as governor. He passed free textbooks. But nobody's remembered as the free textbook George Wallace guy. And I think Trump is going to be the same way. I'm astounded that there's not more self-awareness of how Trump will be remembered, not in the long-term future, but even in the near future, and why there hasn't been more opposition to him, and why there hasn't just been more selfish realization that if I don't stand up to Donald Trump, I'm going to go down as a Trump person. But it hasn't happened, and they're very comfortable with Trump, obviously, and that's how it's going to be remembered.
And what do you say, finally, Stu Stevens, to those Republicans who've worked with you over the many, many years and say he's a traitor to the cause? He's gone over to the other side. He's forgotten all the good things we did together.
My feelings about this is very contradictory because I really like the people I work for. They're good people. You know, if they saw you stopped on the side of the road with a flat tire, they'd help you. They'd make good neighbors. My feeling is that there's a collective failure here by the party. Most of us go through life, at least I know I certainly do, trying to avoid moral tests. But Donald Trump was a moral test that we couldn't avoid. The party couldn't. And we failed. I think it's particularly tragic in that this generation of American politicians are heirs to the greatest generation. And you know, people like my dad spent 3 years in South Pacific, 28 island landings. And courage isn't standing up for Donald Trump. Courage is getting out of the boat when the guy in front of you got shot. And that was their legacy. And I think that they betrayed that legacy by not standing up to the principles that they said that they were for.
Stuart Stevens, the book is It Was All a Lie, How the Republican Party Became Donald Trump. Thank you so much for talking with us.
Thank you.
I like the book. I like what the guy said, due to the fact that my mind and my history goes all the way back to the Carter, Nixon, Ford, and yes, to some extent, even the Kennedy era, though Kennedy didn't remain president for a very long time. I was still born during the time that he was president and become assassinated. But I can look back and see where the party itself has become nonchalant in them no longer believing in the same cause that they claim that they believe in. Because if they did, they would have hushed or chastised Donald Trump a whole lot more so than what they have towards the Republican Party. I realize that he's the Republican president, but just because you're the Republican president don't mean that you're above the Republican Party. And whenever the Republican Party sits nonchalantly by and allows for such idiotic behavior to go on, then you have to agree with what this gentleman just said, that the party is no longer the same party. But now I've had other hardcore, sold out Democrats that said the same thing about the Democrat Party. They've even led me to believe that it wasn't that the Democrat Party, that they, the voter, abandoned the Democrat Party, but rather that the Democrat Party abandoned the voter. So I've had it on both ends, and once more, what has created this type of atmosphere of chaos? What has manifested this sense of upheaval that is now coming out of both parties, regardless whether it's Republican or Democrat? I think it's because of the stain that was committed to this country long about 1988 during Ronald Reagan's administration, whenever something occurred that was not fully addressed in a proper professional form, that has now led us down the road of where we are today, towards being trillions and trillions of dollars in debt and problems everywhere. That's what I believe. I believe that the American people, as well as the world, got shortchanged. In other words, they got hijacked. They got hijacked by a demonic, influential force that was taking the initiative or the charge over that particular event that should have happened that didn't happen, and because of it, it has put us where we are today in a very, very precarious state, and some even a very dangerous state, because just as the Bible says, we are definitely living in perilous times. And for a group of people to think that they was going to be able to buckle, bamboozle, for a group of people that thought that they was going to be able to manipulate God and God's people pertaining to biblical Bible prophecy, goes all the way back to the Pharaohs, whenever the movement began back then, of a group of people that felt like that they could overcome God and God's select, or God's elect, which was his select at that time, towards achieving what needed to be achieved during the time of Moses. I've said all along, and I'll say again, it's in reference towards what has already done occurred, and what has occurred in my particular situation, towards it not going full face around about in telling the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, in regards to this Project 213 that began in 1983, whenever an automobile rode over on top of me. There's nothing that I can do about it now other than doing what I'm doing, which is telling my story again and again and again, and hopefully maybe one day there'll be somebody, there'll be 2 people, 3 people, 4 people, 40 people, 4,000 people, 4 million people, 40 million people, 4 billion people that will listen to what I have to say. Because what has occurred here has in fact been a travesty. It's been a travesty upon to the innocent. It's been a travesty upon to those that didn't have no say-so. It's been a travesty to the church community and to God. Once more, these are the influences of Satan that is embedded into various associations and organizations here in the United States that has literally tainted good, innocent people such as myself. May we as a society, especially a Christian society, learn from these mistakes, that we don't never ever try to buck the system again. And this continues to complete itself in a circle again and again and again towards various things that has occurred in this resistance movement that began thousands of years ago, whenever Lucifer himself decided that he was going to challenge the heavenly kingdom. And it still is being effective to this day towards this resistance movement against the very word of God, again and again and again. That's the reason why God is telling us in his first 4 chapters of Revelations that he has not found our works perfect yet, to go back and do thy first works over again, or else he will throw thee off into a bed a bed of condemnation, a bed of sickness, a bed of judgment, a bed of despair. And that's basically what has occurred here in all the cultures, in all the nations throughout this planet. They have been thrown off into a bed of despair. May we learn from our past mistakes so that we no longer continue to make the same mistake again and again and again, so that we can strive towards that better, perfect, not only union, but that better, perfect world that God intended for all of us to be a part of and to live in these latter days. Thank you for listening, and God bless, and good luck to all of us as we end the program here at 291 Thompson Road, Sharon, Tennessee, zip code 38255. Good luck to all of us, and once more, as we say and say again, Shalom. Shalom to God's people who are striving towards a better tomorrow in regards to all this. I'm going to end by listening to the latter part of this real quick, and then I'll cut off without any type of formal goodbyes. God bless America, and good luck to all of us.
On August 6, 1945, the United States dropped the first atomic weapon on Hiroshima, Japan. In the coming days, we will examine this 75th anniversary, the bomb's immediate aftermath, and its lasting legacy. Today, Nick Schifrin looks at the president's sole authority to launch such a weapon and how that authority came to be.
An American airplane dropped one bomb on Hiroshima.
75 years ago tomorrow, President Truman announced the U.S. had harnessed the basic power of the universe. The Manhattan Project took 3 years to build and test an atomic bomb. Throughout, Truman and his advisors called it the gadget, thinking it was just another very big weapon.
Even the thousands of men and women working on the project had no idea of the staggering energy they were to release.
Truman had actually delegated to the military when and where to launch. On August 6th, he believed only atomic bombs could end the war.
If they do not now accept our terms, they may expect a rain of ruin from the air, the like of which has never been seen on this earth.
But after Enola Gay flew over Hiroshima and the mushroom clouds slowly darkened the sky, the devastation at the city was overwhelming and endless. Survivors' hair was burned, their skin peeled off.
A few days later, the second atomic terror was loosed on Nagasaki.
After that, Truman decided the decision to drop a third bomb could only be made by him. Presidential sole authority was born.
The purpose of these bases can be none other than to provide a nuclear strike capability against the Western Hemisphere.
In 1962, after the Cuban Missile Crisis, President Kennedy wanted to tighten nuclear control, so a briefcase with launch codes started traveling with the president. Today, that so-called football is the symbol of the president's sole authority to launch.
They will be met with fire and fury like the world has never seen.
President Trump is the first president in more than 40 years to have his sole authority questioned openly by Congress.
Many Americans share my fear that the president's bombastic words could turn into nuclear reality.
And sole authority is the subject of a new book, The Button, The New Nuclear Arms Race from Truman to Trump, by former Secretary William Perry. Secretary Perry, welcome back to the NewsHour. Let's begin with this fundamental question. Is the threat of nuclear annihilation a distant one?
Well, we can be thankful that we've gone 75 years since Hiroshima and Nagasaki without launching the bomb. But I believe the likelihood of it being used now, of breaking that record, is higher today than it was any time during the Cold War. That is, the danger of a nuclear catastrophe today is equal to the darkest days of the Cold War. And most of the public simply do not understand that reality.
There are many checks in the system that you write about preventing an unintentional launch, preventing an unauthorized launch, but is there any way to prevent a determined president from launching a nuclear weapon?
If the president decides to launch, he has the authority to do it, he has the equipment to do it, and if it goes, there's no way of calling it back, and there's no way of destroying it in flight. It would be an unprecedented catastrophe, far greater than World War II.
And that's, of course, the context for the main proposition that you have in the book, that the president should not have the sole authority to launch. Why is that?
There is a likelihood of a nuclear catastrophe today, but that's not because we expect Russia to be making an attack on us. That's not going to happen. Their leaders are not suicidal. Deterrence really does work. It could happen by a political miscalculation by the president, a false alarm, or it could happen because of a lack of sanity on the part of either the American president or the Russian president. All of those things, none of them is likely, but even if it's only 1 in 100, these odds are not good when you consider the other end of the odds would be the end of our civilization.
The main argument, of course, for having nuclear weapons at the ready and having the president as the sole authority to launch is the requirement to respond quickly. As you write, Russian nuclear weapons hypothetically could be launched and land inside the United States within 30 minutes. Doesn't the president need to be able to respond quickly?
The reason we thought we needed a quick launch was because we believed that we were going to get a surprise attack, originally from the Soviet Union and today from Russia, and we wanted to launch our ICBMs where that attack landed and destroyed our ICBMs in their silos. We have, however, at sea, more than enough nuclear capability to respond to Russia, and Russia knows that. There is no hurry about ending civilization. We should take time to consider that. We can wait it out to we're sure it really is an attack before we respond. Best way of assuring that is to give us enough time to consider what's happening, bring in other people for consultation, technical consultation and political consultation before a launch is ever made.
I want to ask about whether this is about the current inhabitant of the White House. You write that for Donald Trump, starting a nuclear war is as easy as sending a tweet. How much of what you're arguing here is about Donald Trump personally, whom you call impulsive?
I believe that no person, no president, should have that authority solely by himself, without consultation, without taking time to deliberation. We have in the past presidents like President Kennedy, but he was taking heavy medications, and that could have clouded his judgment. We had Richard Nixon, who was in the last few months in his office drinking heavily, and that could have clouded his judgment. Even Ronald Reagan, the last few months he was in the White House, was in the early stages of Alzheimer's. So there is no reason that we have to give this authority to one person, and we should make every effort then to bring other people into the decision and slow down the decision process. No quick launch.
The other main change you advocate in the book, Mr. Secretary, is that the U.S. cannot launch on the warning of an attack, that is, before an attack is unambiguously confirmed. Why is that?
Because we have had false alarms in the past, 3 of them that I'm historically aware of. And if a president responds to an alarm and it turns out to be false, there's nothing he can do to recall the missiles. So he will have started a nuclear war by accident.
And lastly, Mr. Secretary, if I could ask you, you were a soldier who helped occupy Japan and saw the aftermath of a nuclear weapon. You've, of course, seen and been through a lot in those decades since, but how much of your argument today is grounded on what you saw back in the 1940s?
I saw, first of all, the devastation in Tokyo, and then I saw Hiroshima and Nagasaki. It was one bomb, one airplane, in an instant. If it's a nuclear war, not just a city can be destroyed in an instant, but a whole civilization. Ronald Reagan and Gorbachev said it best, which is a nuclear war cannot be won and must never be fought.
Former Secretary William Perry, thank you very much.
You're very welcome. Thank you.
Being inclined to go ahead
is grounded on what you
go ahead and speak again. I hope my viewers forgive me for me taking this by the cuff, talking right now. But the fact of the matter is, just as of yesterday, there was an explosion that hit over in a third world country, Beirut, that they have just announced at least 200,000 people will be left homeless. It literally leveled a whole area and registered 3.3 on the Richter scale. This particular incident was seen for almost 150 miles, or felt or heard for over 150 miles away. Similar towards the accident that occurred over the fertilizer called ammonium nitrate that happened in 2013 in a town called West Texas, just north of Waco, give or take about 20 miles from that area, that also left a fingerprint of devastation that to this day the ATF and the FBI still believes that was initiated intentionally because of the close proximity of it not just being in the Waco area, but the close proximity of the date in which it went off on. Plus they've got other hardcore evidence indicating that it was done intentionally pertaining to the ammonium nitrate factory. That is in correspondence of what went on in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma 2 years later. The only problem with the fingerprint of the seismograph machine is that they still can't properly explain how come on the day of the Oklahoma bombing there was actually 2 seismographs simultaneously within seconds apart that occurred. Once more, these events that various people such as myself and other investigators and detectives have brought to a abrupt conclusion that if there ever is an atomic bomb that goes off or a nuclear bomb that goes off, it will make all 3 incidences simultaneously combined look like child's play in comparison to what we're talking about as far as the 75th anniversary that will come up tomorrow, whenever one of our prior presidents made the announcement. So please, whenever you look at these types of devastations, realize that whenever people are playing God in having the ability or the power of pressing the button, I am like this individual. One person alone should never have the power or the capability, regardless whether it be the country of Russia, the country of China, the country of India, the country of America, or any other country, should never have the ability of pressing the button, giving out the launch codes, and doing something on this magnitude, up on this scale, to this planet Earth. We as a society must never make this mistake towards humanity. That would be unleashing on a gravitation that we cannot even begin to fathom of how horrible something like this would be. Scorching, killing everything in its path. So as we remember this day of the 75th pressing the button, let's remember how crucial, how sensitive that life truly is whenever it comes to the mushroom cloud. Thank you for listening. Forgive me for speaking in, but we felt like that it was essential after all the stuff that the Windmill Ministries has been through in the past 30 plus years in trying to prevent something like this from ever occurring. Good luck to all of us. And once more, shalom.
They were to release.
Truman had actually delegated to the military when and where to launch. On August 6th, he believed only atomic bombs could end the war.
If they do not now,
Believed only atomic bombs could end the war. On August 6th, he believed only atomic bombs could end the war. Launch. On August 6th, he believed only atomic bombs could end the war.
if they do not now accept our terms, they may expect a rain of ruin from the air, the like of which has never been seen on this earth.
But after Enola Gay flew over Hiroshima and the mushroom clouds slowly darkened the sky, the devastation overwhelming and endless. Survivors' hair was burned, their skin peeled off.
A few days later, the second atomic terror was loosed on Nagasaki.
After that, Truman decided the decision to drop a third bomb could only be made by him. Presidential sole authority was born.
The purpose of these bases can be none other than to provide a nuclear strike capability against the Western Hemisphere.
In 1962, after the Cuban Missile Crisis, President Kennedy wanted to tighten nuclear control, so a briefcase with launch codes started traveling with the president. Today, that so-called football is the symbol